Welcome to the Proceedings Podcast. I'm Bill Hamblett, the editor-in-chief at the U.S. Naval Institute. It's Thursday, the 23rd of October, 2025. Good to have you on board, everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by Booz Allen. Booz Allen delivers outcomes with speed for the nation's most critical defense priorities. Work with solution engineers who use AI, cyber, and quantum to help warfighters collaborate faster with allies and partners from the open seas to the edge of space. Learn more at boozallen.com/defense. Mark your calendar for the Naval Institute's annual Defense Forum Washington at the International Spy Museum in downtown Washington, D.C. on 10 December from 1300 to 1700, followed by a reception. This year's theme is Accelerating Shipbuilding to Pace the Threat. We've invited both the CNO and the Secretary of the Navy. We always have leaders from both sides of the aisle in Congress. It's always a great event, and it is free to Naval Institute members. Before I get to my guest today, I have to mention what I was doing last week. There was a conference for editors-in-chief of international naval journals down in Valparaiso and Viña del Mar, Chile last week, and I got to go. It was one of the best events I've ever attended. I want to thank my Chilean Navy counterpart, retired Vice Admiral Arturo Undurraga Diaz, and his staff for hosting the event. We talked about publishing, artificial intelligence, global strategic trends, shipbuilding, lots of topics. My counterparts from Spain, Mexico, Uruguay, Peru, Argentina, Guatemala, Brazil, and Chile were all there. We visited the Chilean Naval Headquarters, their Maritime Operations Center, very impressive, by the way, and their Naval War College. I was living my best life last week, so I had to say thank publicly to Arturo and his staff. Muchísimas gracias, Admiral. What a great time. Okay, so back to the show. My guest today is Lieutenant Seth Breen, U.S. Navy. He wrote a wonderful leadership article we published last year in Proceedings called The Nimitz Way Still Applies. And in September of this year, he published an article with SimSec titled Reprioritize SWO Tactical Qualifications for the High-End Fight. And I wanted to talk to him about both articles on the show. So, Seth, welcome to the show.
Hey, sir. Thank you for having me on for this. Looking forward to it.
All right. So first, just tell our listeners about yourself. You've had an interesting run so far. You started your Navy career as an enlisted cryptologic technician, and now you're a surface warfare officer. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, sir. Yes. So started off as a CTT, was on Abraham Lincoln out of Newport News when she was going through her RCOH, and then got through basic phase. In that time, I applied for OCS and got selected for that and went SWO. From there, after commissioning, I went to USS Monterey out of Norfolk, Virginia. She was on a surge deployment, actually, in the 5th Fleet, because it was shortly after the collisions. And then from there, I was the electrical officer, got qualified, OOD and SWO, ended up fleeting up to be the fire control officer. So I went from my first tour to my second tour, did another deployment with her, 5th and 6th Fleet. And then after that, I was actually on that deployment and I applied for the talent management. And this was an opportunity for me to go and be an exchange officer with the UK at their version of what I would say is SWOS for us in the US. So this is where all of their junior officers go through to learn navigation, and then their PWOs or our TAOs, they go there to become PWOs and even go through that for command pipeline as well. So I did that for 2 years, and it was an incredible experience. Cannot recommend it enough if you ever get a chance to do an exchange tour. Besides being able to travel all over the place, it was just an exciting experience.
And then where was that exchange tour? Where was that command in the UK?
So that was at HMS Collingwood, and it's just outside of Portsmouth, so down south.
Got it. So HMS, I was a little confused in your bio because I saw HMS Collingwood and I was like, that must be a ship. And then I looked it up, and it's, despite its HMS Her Majesty's ship, it's not a ship. It's what they call a stone frigate, which is a shore command in the Royal Navy.
Yes, sir. So as old as some of their ships out there as well. But yeah, it was a great time. And then after coming back stateside, I applied for the IAMD WTI program and was selected.
Integrated Air and Missile Defense Weapons Tactics Instructor. So you are a Jedi Knight of the SWO community now.
Yes, sir. That's the goal. That's still, no matter how much I learned on that course, I'm still learning. So I don't think I'll ever get to Jedi Master, but I'm working towards it. And then after that, reported to Newport, Rhode Island to go to be an instructor at Surface Warfare Schools Command. So there I'm with N73 as a maritime warfare instructor for the department head students that are coming through to become TAOs and go be department heads on their next ships. And then I just recently found out, because I will be starting department head school in January, actually. So I'll be hopefully the detailers don't get mad. I will be the weapons officer on USS Mitcher out of Norfolk, Virginia.
Nice. So one of your students is a former editorial board member, Lieutenant Calvin Cass, is in department head school now. I don't know if you've met Calvin, just got up there recently, but he left the Naval Academy and our ed board a month ago or so, and headed up to Newport. So you have not been a department head yet, but you are a WTI. You've done your JO tours, both on Monterey as a SWO, and then you did an exchange tour with the Royal Navy, teaching their equivalent of surface warfare officers over there near Portsmouth. So great. So let's talk a little bit about your article, your leadership article on Admiral Nimitz that we published last year. Admiral Nimitz, by the way, my favorite admiral in U.S. naval history. So what got you interested in Nimitz?
Yes, sir. He's one of my favorites as well, so I'm glad we're in agreement there. But it was actually the Mastering the Art of Command, the book written by Trent Home.
Oh, yeah.
So I read that book. I couldn't put it down. Honestly, it was an easy read. And so just going into and reading how Admiral Nimitz, his leadership styles, starting at what a terrible time to go into his position. It was right after Pearl Harbor, and he had to essentially pick up everybody, the staff there, everybody that was there to rebound from such a pivotal experience. And so it's just interesting in how he goes into detail about Admiral Nimitz, even though there were some errors in the leading up to Pearl Harbor, he didn't just go and fire everybody. He really didn't have the time to rebuild a staff, but his goal was to get people back up on their feet and realize, like, you may have taken it on the chin, but we have a fight to fight.
Yeah. What makes that leadership style stand out to you? Like, what were some specific things that you thought, okay, I want to emulate, these 3 or 4 things about Nimitz in your leadership style?
It's definitely got me to focus on making sure to have commander's intent. If you know what your boss is thinking or what your boss wants, it makes your job and their job easier. And then one of the things that he quotes in there is the relentless pursuit of perfection. And so I kind of experienced that when I was a JO, I was a FCO, and I had a fit
fire control officer.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So I was doing one of my fitness report debriefs with the CO, and it was Captain Baggett at the time. And he told me, he's like, you are a great FCO. I know that you're very tactical, but I haven't been able to assess a whole lot of your experience to lead beyond your division. And so I got that feedback and immediately took it to my department head. And we kind of had a conversation where essentially I told him I needed him to take off some days from work so I could be the pseudo department head. From then on, once I got that, it didn't take very long to where I was starting to get tasked with cover down for more meetings. Not everybody enjoys meetings. And then just fill in the role to where he could focus on being the SWO, or the senior watch officer for the command. And so once I started getting that empowerment, it got me on that relentless pursuit of perfection, which at the time I didn't realize that was Admiral Nimitz's kind of motto.
Got it. I love it. I remember when I was a JO, I read E.B. Potter's biography just called Nimitz. One of the things that stood out to me about Nimitz was that he'd give direction to his staff. He would tell them what he wanted, what his expectations were, and then instead of hovering over them, Nimitz took care of himself, right? He was a sort of a model for making sure that he took care of himself in amidst all the stress, the unbelievable amount of stress that's on him in World War II. And he's getting pressure from Admiral King back in Washington. He's getting pressure from his subordinates. He's, trying to, measure out the two, right? But he would pretty regularly go and play tennis, right? He would go and take care of himself and stay fit and play tennis, or he'd go to the pistol range and he would shoot pistol for a while, and then he would go back and see what his staff had for him. But there wasn't this, I'm gonna tell you what to do, and then I'm gonna hover over you and I'm gonna micromanage you. I just really like that about Nimitz, this idea that, okay, I'm gonna tell my staff what to do. I'm gonna trust that they're gonna do it, and then I'm gonna go do what I need to do for myself to keep my sanity in this insane situation, and then I'll come back and we'll measure their progress. So that's one of the things that stood out to me. So you mentioned your CO there on Monterey. You mentioned your department head who helped you with that. I'm just curious, during your exchange tour with the Royal Navy, did you see any significant differences in leadership styles between the U.S. and British navies?
So I never got underway with when I was out there on exchange. I did a lot of their warfare simulators, so I could kind of see at least the role between the COs and the POs when they were doing a tactical event. Yeah. And it's definitely very similar to how we kind of fight, with speaking in intentions and then working with the CO, essentially providing the CO all the information, not necessarily waiting for them to make a decision, kind of making the decision, and then looking to see if the CO is going to be like, yeah, let's do it, sounds great, or no, let's rethink this kind of process. So very similar in that aspect. I got a long leash, if you will, when I was out there with my Royal Navy CO. There was supposed to be 2 positions for U.S. Navy exchange officers there, but there was only one filled, and the other one had been gapped for about 5 years.
Wow.
And it was a lieutenant commander spot. And so they really value us as U.S. Navy exchange officers. They really valued our input and our experience. And so he came to me and he was like, Seth, I need this spot filled. What can you do for me? And if you need something from me, like if you need me to bring some rank to the table, I can. And I was like, sir, I got you. Just trust me. It's probably not going to be a lieutenant commander position, but I can get you a lieutenant with experience. And he let me run with it. And it didn't really, like we like to say in the Navy, it didn't use a long screwdriver to kind of make sure I was doing what he wanted. Yeah. I gave him the reassurance that I'll get this done. And if I needed something, I would. And within a couple months, I had the position filled, and then that person came out there. So then there was 2 people providing training for the POs from the U.S. Navy side.
Nice. How did the tactical trainers, the simulators for the Royal Navy's, combat direction center, essentially, I don't know what they call it, right? But how did their simulators compare to the simulators that you're used to working on in the U.S. Navy?
Very similar. They kind of start with the same process for like the department head students. We have them start in the multi-mission tactical trainers, or the MITS, and that's a computer-based console. And that's just getting them to learn how to do a proper check print, or how to communicate with each other on the nets. And then when they get to their final phase of the event, when they're essentially their graduating event, they're in ship simulated consoles, or very similar consoles, just like we have at Dahlgren. To where if you look in there, you think that you're on an Aegis destroyer, very similar to theirs. And so, yeah, they have very similar setup whenever they're doing their training as well.
Got it. Cool. All right. Let's talk about your SimSec article and surface warfare officer tactical training. So your main point, as I took it away, right, is that young surface warfare officers now are required to spend too much time focused on engineering qualifications and not enough on tactical watch qualifications, or fighting the ship. So just describe the tension there, and talk a little bit about what qualification hoops a young SWO has to jump through, and why those engineering quals perhaps are too much.
Yeah, I mean, first, I will always advocate that everybody, especially if you want to become an officer of the deck or eventually a CO of a ship, you have to have a strong understanding, working knowledge of the engineering plant. So I will always recommend that you need that. But there's so many qualifications. One of them for JOs when they show up brand new to the Navy or brand new to the ship, one of the qualifications is the SWO engineering PQS. And that's one to where you get all of that. And that's one that you have to have before you can become officer of the deck. And so that's getting you to understand, well, what does it mean if you're one of the GTMs go down when you're underway and you're on dual shafts, but you only have one engine online for each one. What does that mean for you? And so the other qualification is kind of a follow-on one, but it's a requirement for command at sea, is the engineering officer of the watch qualification. And that's one is kind of where I'm trying to draw the line, is that is a high level advanced qualification as far as the engineering plant, because you are the eyes and ears of the captain down in the engineering plant. You're running everything down there. If a casualty happens, you have to know your casualty control procedures, etc. But you're also competing with we'll say like a GSM-1 that they need this qualification, but they've been in the Navy for 10 years doing engineering stuff. And they need this to potentially advance for chief. If you have that person down there, that GSM-1, and then you have a lieutenant junior grade coming down there, well, now there's potentially a competition for time because they need it for advancement. You also need it for advancement. And then you also have folks that in their JO time, like I was electro first, so I got that engineering experience. And then I became FCO, the fire control officer. So I got that combat experience, and I was sitting the air watchstander for our deployment. So I got both experiences. And I was well on my way to qualify for TAO, or the Tactical Action Officer. But if I wanted to continue my career later on in the Navy and potentially have an opportunity for command at sea, I had to focus on EAL and divert my attention away because I needed to get it done. So I'll always quote a top snipe that I had, now Master Chief Theodore. And he said that without engineering, a ship is just a well-armed barge. And I completely agree with that. But now we're in active engagements on a daily basis. It's kind of settled out quite a bit, but we had ships that were essentially going hours in operating in the weapon engagement zone and dealing with, anti-ship ballistic missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, UAVs. And we've been successful in all of those engagements so far. And so I think we're getting into a time to where we really need to start focusing more on the tactical qualifications, especially if you have your department head students that maybe don't have that tactical training beforehand. Well, they have potentially a steeper learning curve than somebody that had an advanced qualification prior to. And so that's where I kind of get into the article of, if you have an advanced qualification earlier, you potentially buy back some risk from senior leadership. If, say, we do go into a high-end fight and we need to shorten the department head course to, instead of it being 6 months long, we need to make it 3 months long or even shorter. Well, if you have people with tactical qualifications earlier, now those that have to assume some risk can buy back some risk.
Okay, let me see if I can unpack a couple of your comments there. So some of it was having to get that EAL qual, the engineering officer of the watch qual, which is kind of an advanced engineering expertise, if you will, for a junior officer. And you need that in order to eventually be screened, it sounds like, for department head and XO and CO. But you said that there's some competition when you're down in the engine room, that there's enlisted folks, first class petty officers, et cetera, who also need to get that qual. And so you're sort of, you're competing for the time to get that qualification from them. You also talked a little bit about, you didn't say Red Sea and Bab el Mandeb, but in 2023 through 2024, the Navy certainly saw a lot of action in both those places in that theater against the Houthis in Yemen, shooting at ships in the Red Sea and the Strait there. And there were days, weeks where Navy ships were firing off a lot of standard missiles and CWIS and all kinds of different weapon systems to protect against, incoming drones and surface drones and ballistic missiles and cruise missiles and all kinds of stuff. So that sort of heightened the awareness and the understanding and the need for those combat direction center skills and qualifications. And perhaps some of that engineering stuff can take a back burner. Is that what that's sort of your main point?
Yes, that was a great summary.
Okay. All right. So for those that are, heavy engineer types, they might be thinking, well, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul at some point, right? As you pointed out, without the engineering department, the ship is really just a heavily defended barge. It's not going to go anywhere. So if the officers don't understand what makes the ship run, all the electrical systems, the gas turbines, everything, right? And EOW also includes some advanced damage control stuff as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I guess how do you buy back that time? And so it sounds like you bought it back with kind of getting some early qualifications, but across hundreds of surface warfare officers, in several different year groups as JO's kind of coming up. If you spend more time focused on the tactical stuff and less time focused on the engineering stuff, does that sort of portend eventually a specialization among surface warfare officers?
I know that's been honestly a heated debate for a while on do SWOs continue to be jack of all trades or do we start specializing? And it's definitely something worth discussing. I know that I know personally there have been people that they didn't want command. It just wasn't something they wanted, but they loved being engineers. And if there was some sort of path for them to continue to just be engineers, SWO engineers essentially, they may have stayed in, whereas they elected to end their commissioning earlier, end after their contract. So it's definitely something worth discussing. I've just recently had a discussion on somebody was talking about, well, maybe the chief engineer should be an LDO, and then that way just SWOs can just stay up in combat and go that route. So there's so many different ways to kind of discuss this and slice it. That would be worth discussing, though. I know the other navies do that. The UK is one of them, to where the engineer down in the plant does not go to combat because they are engineering officers instead of SWOs. So there's something to be said there. Has everybody else been doing it right and we're slow to catch up to it, or do we stick doing what we're doing? So it's definitely worth discussing, though.
Yeah, I remember when I was an attaché in Russia. This is 20 years ago or so, and just talking with my counterparts from a lot of other navies that were also attachés in Russia, and I was surprised at how many navies have that model and not the U.S. model, where our surface warfare officers are generalists, where, as you said, you do combat direction, you do bridge watchstanding, you do engineering, you do all of it, right? And in the Russian Navy, they have the split model, where they've got engineers the snipes that never see the light of day, and they've got the navigation / combat direction officers, the SWOs equivalent, I guess you would say. The Royal Navy does it that way. The Indian Navy does it that way as well. There were others. I don't know if the Chinese Navy does it. The Chinese Navy has a different sort of split they have political commissars and they have the command track folks. And that's a whole different ball of wax, so we won't go there. But quite a few Latin American countries also, I think, have the split between the tactical officers and the engineering officers. I'm curious, Seth, what kinds of feedback have you been getting from fellow SWOs on your article?
Yeah, it got a lot of attention. I have to thank the SMITIC commander, Admiral Zer. So the article was published in the morning, and that afternoon, he had already read it and sent it to his staff members to get in contact with me. And so it was a great opportunity. I got in contact with his staff, and then so you have SMITIC, and then you have another entity called SWICTIC. The acronym escapes me on what it all stands for.
SWITIC is Surface and Mine Warfare Development Center.
Yes.
That's out in San Diego. It's a relatively new command, maybe about 10 years old. And that's the command that creates the warfare tactics instructors, right?
That's correct.
So this was something that was established about a decade ago to do advanced training for surface warfare officers to create the WTIs, but then also to help with the surface warfare advanced tactical trainers, right? That you put all the ships through that SWOT training, which is a big part of the tactical proficiency. And I know some senior SWOs specifically highlighted the value of that SWOT training and the WTIs in the success that the Navy had, against the Houthis in the last year and a half out in the Red Sea area. So a lot of kudos to SMITIC. But so you got some feedback from the CO and from folks on his staff out there?
I did. And so I got in contact with his team, with the SWICTIC team, Lieutenant Commander Jeff Bolstad, and then Lieutenant Matthew Bain. And so what they're doing is they're essentially trying to find out where the attrition happens with people and their tactical qualifications, and then how many hours kind of makes a good SWO or a decent SWO. And then also there's now monthly LOKs that ships have to do for like all of their qualified TAOs. And then eventually it'll encompass like the people that are sitting air and surface. So there's these LOKs, and then they're actually flying or having TAOs from the waterfront. So out on the East Coast and out on the West Coast come to San Diego to do a TAO assessment.
Wow.
And I've been on shore duty, so this is kind of my first time hearing about it when I wrote the article. So it was very enlightening for me, not being at sea for the last couple of years, to hear about this. And so they're going through, they have a database of, for the LOKs is about 1,000 questions that when they fly people out for these assessments, they take an LOK, I believe it's 65 questions.
Yeah, what's LOK stand for?
The level of knowledge test.
Level
so
of knowledge. Okay.
Yeah, so essentially a quick test. And it covers all the warfare areas. So air warfare, surface, amphibious warfare, BMD as well, or ballistic missile defense. And then after that, they also get a little survey sheet on you to what was your previous experience. And then you go down to the simulator, and they put you on a ship. They focus right now. They're focusing on an Aegis destroyer, and they put you, and you have a watch team, and they just want to see how you're going to tackle the problem. The simulator does get kinetic, so you have to be able to defend the ship, but they just want to see your thought process. And so they're gathering all this data to eventually kind of feed back to the fleet of, all right, these ships, their experience is great in this area, but not so great in this area. And so it allows the ships to focus on that training when they're doing whenever they're doing their combat systems training team events on ship. So it's kind of, that's how they're trying to go there, at least trying to get an assessment or a metric on what the standard needs to be.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds incredibly rigorous. I know that the Navy took a serious round turn, the surface warfare community did after the 2017 collisions, the McCain and Fitzgerald. They looked very hard at time between sea tours. They found that there was, they were tending to have lieutenant commanders be away from sea time for 6-7 years to get a shore tour, to get a joint school, JPME, all of those kinds of things. And they tightened that back up again. They put an emphasis on department head. There's a lot more screening. So the simulators, before we started recording this episode, just for the listeners, Seth and I were talking about the simulators up at Surface Warfare Schools Command. They've also got them out in other fleet concentration areas for the bridge watch simulators, navigation simulators, which I got to see thanks to one of our editorial board chairs a couple of years ago. I was very impressed at the realism of, he put me at nighttime in the Strait of Malacca with, dozens and dozens of contacts all around. It was really, it was a varsity kind of a scenario. But he said that's what they do when you're getting ready to go back as a department head, and when you're getting ready to go back as an XOCO, as they do those check rides, right? And so that's impressive. It sounds like they're moving towards that on the tactical side too. Is that what I heard?
Yes, and with these level of knowledge pieces that they're doing monthly, it's also allows senior officers, so either fleet commands, to look at a ship, or even the CO of the ship themselves, to pull this up. And then eventually, it has not been promulgated yet, but eventually be able to look at it and be like, how is my team? What do we need to focus on? So that's the goal. So it just gives you something to measure and then set goals for yourself.
Yeah, on a tactical basis. That's great. Seth, we're kind of running out of time here. Any saved rounds or questions I should have asked but maybe didn't ask?
No, it's been great. I appreciate it. And the more attention we can get on this and getting more focus on just maintaining or increasing our tactical proficiency out in the fleet, the better we're going to be as a Navy as a whole, especially if that high-end fight arises.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And the conversation is incredibly valuable, right? So as you alluded to, for maybe a century and a half now, since the advent of steam power in the Navy, this conversation about generalists versus technical specialists has been going on. Previews of coming attractions in the December issue of Proceedings. I'm actually editing a piece by a retired captain that talks about how's the Navy going to handle artificial intelligence, and this argument about specialists versus generalists is pertinent to that conversation too. So it's a really important, I guess, series of issues. And how do you deal with technological revolution, and how do you make sure that you're maintaining certain proficiencies, important tactical proficiencies, at a time when there's just so much information to master in a young officer's career path and in their specialty and area of expertise. So good on you for writing about both of these topics, about leadership and Nimitz and SWO Tactical Qualifications. So it's great having you on the show.
Thank you, sir.
All right, what are you going to write about for us next?
Oh, yeah, that's a loaded question. What to write about?
All right, well, keep an eye out for our essay contests.
I will.
Yeah, essay contests are always a good prompt, right? And then you have the chance of winning $5,000 or $6,000 if you write a champion essay. So
absolutely,
tackle that next. Okay, my guest today has been Navy Lieutenant Seth Breen. He's a surface warfare officer. You can find his proceedings article on Admiral Nimitz by going to our website and searching on the Nimitz Way or just Seth Breen. And his SWO tactical training article is at simsec.org. Seth, thanks for being on the show today, and I hope you'll write for us again soon.
All right, thank you.
Okay, a reminder, sign up for Defense Forum Washington, 10 December at the International Spy Museum, downtown DC. For more information and to register, go to usni.org/events. You won't want to miss it. If you like the show, ring the bell, subscribe, tell a friend. Until next episode, remember, victory begins at the Naval Institute.